Welcome to the Transport Leaders Podcast, where we discuss breakthrough ideas and bold solutions transforming the future of transport around the world. So join a global community of transport leaders, professionals, academics, and advocates as we unpack transport's toughest challenges and spotlight strategies for driving real change, from system reform levers and political realities to sustainability and technological disruption. Join me, McCabe and Russell King, and our guests as we offer expert perspectives as we discuss ways to transform our transport systems. G'day, I'm Graham McCabe. I'm the founder of Step Advisory, a transport planning and traffic engineering firm, and I've worked in consultants in government for over 25 years across Australasia and Asia.
Hello, I'm Russell King. I'm a transport strategist and the founder of the Transport Leader blog and newsletter, and I've worked on the policy side of transport for around 20 years.
Great. So, Russell, what are we going to talk about today?
Nothing important for transport. We're going to talk about congestion.
I'm sure everybody's got an opinion on the causes and solutions for congestion.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting discussion because it's one of the things that I think drives a lot of bad transport policy. So I think it should be an interesting way of going. But let's start. What causes congestion, Graham?
Okay, so congestion at its most fundamental level is an imbalance between where people and goods are and where they need to be, and a lack of supply of a network between those two things. So at its most basic level, if I wanted to get from where I am to where you are, if we had magic, I could just appear beside you.
That sounds like a good transport solution. Can we go with that one?
Yeah. Whereas we don't have magic, so I need to travel. And if everybody else decides to travel along that route at the same time, then we cause friction between each other. And that means that there's only a certain number of us that would be able to travel along that route. And then if we have people who want to cross our path, then how do we decide who gets to go? Do I get to go? Does John, who's trying to cross from the right, get to go? We could have a free-for-all, like in some parts of the world. And that, again, creates friction. And the friction is what results in people getting stuck and having to queue and negotiate their way past each other. And as more and more people or vehicles try to travel along the route, then you get stuck in a queue. And at its most simple level, that's what congestion is.
One of the things you sort of mentioned there was people and vehicles. So that's a complication here, right? In the sense of, the supply of the infrastructure, and what its capacity is very dependent on the mode of travel.
So, yeah, so we have there's a concept called space time. So within the transport system, so we're not talking about physics and three-dimensional relationships of how gravity works. It's how much space do you take up on the transport system and how long are you occupying that space. And from that we get, so you can move 10,000 people all squeezed together like this, walking down a footpath going, or you can put them in a car on their own and they can be nice and luxurious, and you can get about 1,000 of them because they're taking up more space for the given distance that they're trying to travel. So you have a volume of space that you're occupying. So, and it's the same with goods as well. So the more space that you allocate to each unit of thing that you're moving, whether it's a person or goods, then the less capacity you have to move that. So when most people would understand roads, so a lane of a freeway can carry up to 2,800 car equivalents per hour at its most dense operation, so traveling about 45 kilometers an hour. Whereas the same space could carry tens of thousands of people on a metro past that same point, because it's much more space efficient, which is, when you get, high capacity vehicles where people are packed in more tightly, you can move a lot more people more quickly.
So this is when we often hear politicians, often around election time, we're going to be a congestion-busting government, okay, and they pump a lot of money into roads to transform junctions, create overpasses, underpasses, tunnels, all sorts of other things. But our cities don't seem to be getting less congested. So is that just simply because the population's always growing, or is there something more than that?
So there's two things. One is if cities are growing population, but even cities where populations decline, you still have congestion. The other is just it's basic economics. You could, or even physics. So you could think of gas laws. Gas expands to fill the available container, the space, the volume in the available container. Economics is similar. When you make something cheaper, so reducing congestion could be making something cheaper. Increasing capacity could be making something cheaper in terms of time allocation, then it's used more. So, and the rule is called the Jevons paradox, which is as you increase capacity, more activity takes place to take up that capacity. And we don't just see it in the transport system, we see it in things like electricity. So as our energy system becomes more efficient, people use more of it. So your TV goes from being 500 watts per hour down to 100 watts per hour. So you buy a bigger TV.
So isn't this just unmet travel demand, and building the bigger road meets their travel demand, and that's a good thing?
So you have two components. So one is unmet demand. So the people who have avoided using that piece of the system, so they're making a less optimal choice. So rather than working in a location where you prefer to work, you work somewhere close to home because it takes too long to get somewhere. So increasing the system capacity or reducing travel times induces people to make that change. And then there's also new trips. So people going, I'm going to go to the shops 3 times this week instead of 2 because it's now easier to get to shops. So there's no economic utility of making that extra trip because you're moving the same amount of total time, you're purchasing the same amount of total products, but you're actually worsening congestion because you're adding trips into the system which weren't previously forecast.
So we add on an extra lane or build a new road, okay? And I appreciate that some of those journeys are going to be new journeys because people are using their time less efficiently than they would have been previously because of the reduced congestion. Nice cat, by the way. Is that really a big issue? Like, what's the problem here? Is that really a big thing? Isn't it good that we've got all these people now that can get close, can travel further to choose, got more job choices and accessibility to more amenities, that's surely going to be the good thing, right?
So, well, it depends on what your purpose of doing the project was. So the accessibility is often misconstrued to relieving congestion. So a new highway or train line or bicycle path that connects two areas that weren't previously connected increases accessibility. So you have access to more things, more opportunities, more choice. So that in itself is good. So if I think in the Australian context, Brisbane has been building a lot of pedestrian bridges across the Brisbane River. And they've all significantly increased accessibility, and that they've also increased the amount of walking, because walking is now a lower cost activity for people to, and they have access to features on that weren't previously. So that's a societal good. Whereas reducing congestion by adding a lane makes, for a short period of time, the disutility of driving goes down, so that more people decide to drive because it's easier to do. And there's a really good example in the Sydney case of the M5 East motorway. So when that was constructed as a tunnel, it was originally supposed to be a tolled road. And there was a last-minute decision to make it not tolled. The design was for 2 lanes based on there being a toll, and there being just disutility associated with people having to pay that toll. And when the decision was made not to have the toll, a lot more people started driving because it was now faster than using the public transport service. So there wasn't an offsetting improvement in the rail system, which was on a directly parallel corridor about 2 kilometres away from it. So there was a lot of mode shift, which was induced by reducing the congestion on the road network.
Yes. And that's one of the key things here as well, isn't it? This is the choice of mode that people use, because, as you talked about earlier, public transport in terms of space is much more efficient than cars. So if you've made it easier to drive, then it's more attractive to use your car than it is to use public transport. So you've now made from a space perspective, you've made the system less efficient.
Yeah, and it's a little bit facetious, but I've used this example in when doing transport strategies and doing engagement workshops with stakeholders. There's an easy way to bust congestion. That's have an economic crisis.
Yeah.
Because there's no demand for travel anymore. If people don't have jobs, if they're not buying things, if they're not making things, then transport demand evaporates. And even without lockdowns during COVID, because there was very little economic activity, transport demand evaporated as all the economies went into a stagnation plate. So you can see that it's very much, as there's conflict between the need and the desire to move, and the system's ability to match that. And you can build your way out of congestion. Controversial statement. The way that you build your way out of congestion is by getting rid of all your land use, by ever widening your freeways so that there's no land use for the people to drive to.
And in fairness,
you have roads and car parks and no land use, you will not have congestion on that freeway.
Yes. I think Los Angeles is still experimenting with that approach.
Yeah, Los Angeles, their 1 cent tax on everything is being pretty. Their investments are accelerating. I think Texas is probably or currently Ontario probably the worst of basket cases in that regard, with their ever widening freeway expansions. And you only have to look at the downtowns of, well, the new downtowns of Dallas and Houston, where you have an average low density because there is so much freeway and so much surface car parking that you have a tower which is surrounded by surface car parking.
Yeah. You hollow out the downtown area, don't you?
Well, that's exactly it. You can build your way out of congestion by destroying everything to create roads and parking.
Yes.
Yeah. So, because eventually nobody will want to live there or go there.
Yeah. I'm not sure that's the recommended strategy for most places, I have to say. Destroy what makes it good, what makes your city great, by building more roads.
But that's what we did in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, was we destroyed places in order to make them great.
It's an interesting paradox. I heard a good one yesterday in terms of analogy. I think this was come from Ben Elton, who's a British comedian.
Yes.
Which was widening roads is like when your dustbin gets full, is rather than emptying the rubbish, is just buying a bigger bin.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty good sort of analogy of what's going on here.
Yeah, and it's not just roads and cars that can have congestion. All forms of transport can have congestion. So ports have congestion. Can you get the containers unloaded fast enough? Can you get the trucks in and out of the gate fast enough? And automation of ports increases capacity, but again, it will result in increased demand because the individual ports will have a lower cost of operation, which will mean that there will be more desire to ship through those ports, because a container that's sitting on a ship to be unloaded or is dockside waiting to be put over on a ship or a truck is costing somebody money, either the container owner in the fact that it's not moving, or the transshipper, or the end customer. Railway systems, you only have to look at the crowding that occurs on any rail system in the world where there's a generally fixed start time for people starting at work.
Yeah.
And the crush loads that you get within stations and on trains at those times, because the demand to be in a place at a certain time exceeds the capacity of the system to be able to deliver that. And if you increase the system supply, then that supply will be filled by additional demand. So, yeah. And, I was working on a school project, and these parents and grandparents who they didn't want to be in a queue of cars to pick up the children from school. So they were all driving when a good number of them could have walked to pick up the children. So the school bell was 3:20. So by the time I got involved in the project, there was a kilometre-long line of cars at 2:50.
Crikey.
Because nobody wanted to be in the queue of cars. So they were all trying to get there earlier and earlier to pick the child.
If it had carried on, they'd have started queuing before school had opened. In order to,
it's Monty Python. When I was a child, my grandparent lined up the day before I went to school in order to pick me up in the afternoon.
Is it Three
Yeah.
Yorkshiremen or something? The sketch.
Yes,
I think,
yeah,
isn't
it is, yeah.
Dear my good lord. Oh, we had it tough in those days.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So, but because they, they didn't want to pick their child up at 3:25. They wanted to pick the child up at 3:20. So, in fact, a lot of these parents were actually risking significant fines because while they're sitting in the queue of cars within a school zone, they were using their mobile phones, which, if you live in the state of New South Wales in Australia, results in a $700 fine and 6 points off your license, I believe, because a mobile phone offence within a school zone is doubled in points and fine. So you really don't want to be doing that as a parent. But to explain to the parents, you are the reason that you are in this queue. And it's that old paradox of you're not in traffic, you are traffic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there are traffic engineers who wouldn't agree with you. Right? So what's their argument?
So their argument is through a lack of training.
Ooh, okay, that's controversial. Yeah. It's
so so
I can see how we're going to caption this episode now.
Yeah.
Traffic engineers make mistakes because through lack of training, but go on.
Well, I'm a traffic engineer, so and as someone who used to train people in intersection analysis and traffic modeling. So when you're assessing a intersection, so you take all the volumes of cars, trucks, buses, pedestrians, cyclists, and you go, well, we have 2 lanes in this direction, and it's a set of traffic lights, so we can fit 2,400 cars an hour going in a straight line, roughly. So when a traffic engineer or a traffic model is looking at a set of traffic signals, you might have 2 lanes which are going straight through the intersection. So you would have a capacity for each of those lanes, and that's about 1,800 vehicles per hour. If none of the other movements were given any of the green time. So if you have 2,000 vehicles, and you have 2 lanes, then you have 1,000 vehicles per lane trying to use up 1,800 vehicles worth of space. So those 1,000 vehicles need about 56% of the time of the time per hour in order to go through, roughly. So then if you have all these other movements which are trying to do the same thing, so if you have a cross intersection, a 4-way junction, where you also have 1,000 vehicles trying to go across, then they also want 55%. So 55% plus 55% is 110%. Doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you have queues. So you have unmet demand for that intersection. So the simplest solution is to add a lane. So your 1,000 divided by 18, your 2,000 divided by 3,600 becomes 2,000 divided by 5,400. So now you're down to almost a third of the time. So a third plus a third equals 2/3. And it's like, okay, well, we can do some other things. We can do some right turning or movements. So we can do opposing movements. And the traffic engineer goes, yep, I've solved my intersection. So that's what you learn as a junior engineer.
Perfect.
The
Sounds
more
great.
experience that you get, the more you should realize that, well, what about the intersection that's up the road? That's where traffic's being held, or the one down the road that's causing a queue, or the unmet demand. Or suddenly somebody wants to, we know there's going to be a supermarket in the area. So you have growth, land use change, induced demand, and then you start going, well, what if we could get some of those people onto a bus instead? And then you go, oh, well, that could take out, we have a frequent bus in there, and maybe that's 5% of the vehicles coming out. So, and if you do it on the cross junction, then 5%, and you're back down to 100%, and you haven't actually made any change.
So to summarize this, the answer for a lot of traffic engineers initially is, only the reason they're getting it wrong is they're only looking at a narrow part of the system.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they don't think about A, the broader system, and B, they don't really take into account the fact that this is going to make it more attractive to use that junction or use that road and induce demand. And so you're going to end up back at square one anyway. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and the upstream and downstream effects.
Yeah. So it's basically the bottleneck, isn't it? You kind of move one bottleneck, and you're going to get to the next set of traffic lights is going to be the next bottleneck as well.
Yeah, or you release all this traffic, which then goes, has to merge onto a freeway.
Yeah.
And the freeway doesn't have enough gaps in it for that traffic to merge safely. So that causes a shockwave back along the freeway. Or you release all these people, and then suddenly they're all trying to get into a car park, into the car parks, into the CBD, because and that often happens with motorways that end on city fringes. Is if you build a new motorway that has ramps into a CBD, then what you do is you just create a big queue in the CBD. And one of the big mistakes a lot of American cities made is they went, oh, well, we have big queues at these ramps into the CBD, and they're blocking onto the freeways. We'll just make all the streets in the city one way to increase capacity.
Yeah.
So you have a one-way system that starts with an exit ramp and ends with an entry ramp.
Yeah. And not much amenity in between.
Well, you end up with pretty much zero amenity, because when your system's designed around the movement and not the place, then you focus on making the movement work really well. So there's no balance.
Okay. So let's move this discussion on. Okay. So our experienced traffic engineers, like yourself, know this and know that a lot more road projects need to be looked at skeptically, okay, and thought through the unintended consequences of increasing the capacity of the system.
Yeah.
Okay. But we're still building a lot of roads. We're still creating a lot more congestion. So from your perspective, what do you think is going wrong?
And so, having experienced this firsthand on a project, and I won't say which project, there's a desire to build the road once for a very long period of time. So there's these road projects on the urban fringes where we're basically creating new stroads. Well, actually, they're not really stroads because they're urban. Well, yeah, they have service roads on each side of them. So they're building a 3 or 4 lane road that, in the anticipation of future demand, so 3 or 4 lanes each way, to be clear, and then getting surprised when it fills up in 10 years rather than 30 years, like the strategic model said. Because when you build a road that's 4 lanes each way and it's 80 kilometers an hour, and the public transport service has zero potential to compete based on time, because when it's first opened, there's no development there, there's no cars. I have a nice easy run.
Yeah.
Oh, why is my trip getting worse? Oh, it's all these new people moving into the area and creating congestion for me.
So I understand that, but people like yourself now know this, right? Experienced engineers know this. So why are they still making the same mistakes from your perspective? I have some views as well.
Well, so this is where we get into the realm of politics and lobbying, because if you want to build a busway, so a busway has 7 meters worth of concrete in width, a few bridges, maybe some stops, set of traffic signals here or there, and that could carry 30,000 people per hour in an area. But if you build a road, well, that's got 8 lanes, plus turning lanes, plus signals, plus underpasses, over bridges, all these other bits things. So there's an industry out there who makes money, consultants, business case specialists, constructors, maintenance people, who make money from building more and more roads.
Okay.
And do you think they're going to say, oh, actually, no, I'm not really that interested in building roads?
So obviously they have a vested interest in roads, but politicians are advised by government agencies. And
consultants who can
but they have, not most transport agencies have some people who are claimed to be experts, at least in transport. Okay. Why are they not advising that this thing doesn't fly?
Well, there are still people who do believe that roads will solve things, unfortunately.
So part of our problem here is our agencies are not focused enough on understanding what's going on the road system and still believe there's building more roads. And part of this is, for me, is transport agencies often are led by people who are not transport experts. And as you said, this is hard for people even with basic traffic engineering training to understand. So if you're a generalist and you're coming in from another policy discipline, you're not going to understand this, are you? Not quickly, anyway.
No. And you look at the new suburbs, new towns, they are very rarely self-sufficient. So they generate demand. And if you have a population that moves into them that doesn't have centralized destinations, so the typical Australian stereotype of somebody who moves into a new greenfields development is a tradie who has a ute who works all over the place.
Yeah.
They need a vehicle.
Yeah.
If they move into a low density area, there's a good chance that their supermarket's 4 or 5 kilometers away.
Yeah.
So, we do have a self-perpetuating system of we build suburbs that are car dependent, for whom we then need to build roads to support those people.
Yeah.
And we've built a system of transport models which forecast all these things that say, well, if you don't build lots of roads, then you're going to have lots of angry voters.
Yeah. Which I think gets us onto an important point here is, yes, you've got all of the people who have got a financial interest in building roads, as you mentioned, but roads are also very popular with the public because intuitively, the public believes that if you have a congested road, the answer is an extra lane, right? That you didn't build the road wide enough.
Yes.
Okay, now it's, as we've talked about it, it's false, but that's the belief of 95% of the people, if not probably more.
Yeah, and when the road is widened, the people who are using the road when it's widened do experience a short-term benefit.
Yep.
And then they blame others for it becoming bad again.
Yep. But
they blame government for not having added 2 lanes when they added them.
So we have a situation which puts politicians in a difficult spot, right? Because I think politicians get blamed a lot for building roads, and I think it's a little bit unfair in many ways. So problem number one is the public wants the roads, and in a democracy, it's very difficult for politicians to go, I appreciate you want this, but we're not going to do it that way. That's difficult. Secondly, they're not even getting great advice necessarily from their agency, which is explaining to them the problems with the roads, explaining to them, induced demand and the paradoxes involved. Okay, so they're not even getting trained up on that as politicians. And politicians, remember, if you're the transport minister, you are like a member of the public in terms of your expertise. Okay, you don't have transport expertise in 95% of the situation. And it's worse in transport than it probably is in other areas because most politicians do not come into politics passionate about transport. They may be passionate about, say, a social justice issue, or they may be passionate about education or the environment. Very few of them come in passionate about transport. And so their level of understanding about transport in the vast majority of situations is very, very shallow. It's no more than the average person on the street, in effect. And if the average person on the street thinks the answer to congestion is to build an extra road, it's not surprising that our politicians do. And then if you're not advising the politicians right from the start and explaining these things to them, even if you do explain it to them, it's going to take a while for it to sink in and get their heads around it.
Well, yeah, and then there's also the time effect as well. Like, a new rail system takes 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
You only have to look at any of the rail projects anywhere in Australia. The minister that initiated that rail project is long gone.
Yep.
Or in the case of WA, they've had a second or third life in politics. Whereas getting an upgrade for your local intersection that can be announced and delivered within a single electoral cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, how many, the politicians will, they will always spruik the benefits of additional buses when they come, but they don't really campaign on that type of thing.
No, I think that is a challenge.
Yeah.
On this, they're not great at getting out on the front foot with regards to public transport generally. Yeah. So yes, we have a problem, people. And my personal view in terms of how to fix it is you kind of got to get your agencies to understand the challenge and get all their ducks in a row in the first place. Because unless they all agree, unless there's a kind of leadership from the agency that says, okay, we need to tackle this problem, then it's very difficult to do anything. And then they can start, I think there's things they can do. So one of the things I think that government agencies could do, if they understand the induced demand problem, is educate the public in that.
Yeah. Well, and even within agencies, there's an education and understanding issue. So you may have
Yeah.
people who work within the agency who live in a more dense urban area with good access to public transport, walking and cycling. And you may also have people who live out in those suburbs
Yeah.
and have to commute a distance to get to the agency's office. So you have two very different experiences of a transport system.
Yeah.
And very different expectations and objectives. So the people who, may live in a outer suburban area and work in a regional office and are in charge of what projects go on in that, prioritizing projects in that regional area, may use their lived experience and focus on improving car access. And it brings me to, the Helsinki example of snow clearing. The roads in the in the 1980s, the roads in Helsinki, and this is from there's a book, I'll put a link to it, which is about how when you only have one part of society making all the decisions, then you end up with gendered outcomes.
Yeah.
The traffic engineers were making sure that the roads were cleared of snow because they were driving on them.
Yes. And the footpaths.
But the footpath, then because it's Helsinki, their wives weren't driving around. Their wives were walking with strollers, but the footpaths weren't getting cleared. So because all the high-paid men were driving around, they were worrying about the roads being cleared of snow, but that was dumping all the snow on the footpaths where their wives and children were.
Yeah, it's why transport needs a lot more women, and it's why all podcasts should have women on them as well.
So it's the middle-aged white guy.
Talking to another middle-aged white guy.
Yeah. But it's also the similar thing. So things that aren't seen aren't measured.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
So I think the key takeaway here then is we need to get our own ducks in a row with regards to transport people understanding the issue and getting agreement, at least within our own profession, around the way forward and what not to be doing.
But again, it is that perspective thing. So, when you're going back to the issue of training, and when I'm teaching somebody the basics in traffic modeling, it's how do you analyze this thing and make sure the model is working properly. That, you're not garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
It's not, okay, here's all the things that you have to think about. When I was trained, looking for unmet demand wasn't part of my training. So, looking for if you fix this bottleneck, what happens?
Yeah.
That was something that I had to learn later. So by the time I was training people, it was part of their training.
Yeah. We had learned.
But so traffic engineers and transport modelers use programs called micro simulation programs, which is where individual vehicles or people are modeled as separate entities rather than it just being a whole heap of generalized formula for the entire system. But a lot of the models have an output in a congested environment, which is called unmet demand. So you'll build a model from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and the traffic that doesn't get loaded into the model at 9 a.m. because it can't get in, it can't be loaded, is called unmet demand.
Yeah.
So there's no going, well, that doesn't happen in the real world. So we need to shift those trips, and then we need to reanalyze everything. Then we need to see if there's still unmet demand.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and transport modeling is more than one episode in its own. But at a fundamental level, everything is seen as a snapshot in time. What is passing me now? How do I make what's passing me now better?
Yeah.
And that's the most basic level. And that's, undergraduate level thinking in the transport space. And a lot of people who do modeling and analysis are much more advanced than that. But the people they're doing the work for aren't. So it's like, in this case, you want the number to go down. So number going down is good.
Yeah.
And that's all they want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Let's wrap it up there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Do you want to do the outro?
Oh, where
Or
is
do you want me to?
I'm happy to do it. Where's the out? Well, have you got the link to the outro?
No, I've just been winging it each week. I hope that superficial dive into congestion has been interesting. I'm sure you'll all have comments about why we're wrong, where we could have done it better. Please leave them below. Once again, thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe on all the platforms. And if you're so kind, you can, buy us a coffee on here or Patreon. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks a lot, Graham. That was a really interesting session on congestion and what causes it. Still think we've got some work to do on how to solve it.
Yeah.